Hi there. Recently, my good friend Jamie had a birthday, and of course we had to make her a birthday cake, because when you've got a baking problem, simply giving a store-bought cake is out of the question. And since Jamie happens to be a chocoholic, that means we need to go overboard and present a chocolate cake with a Brownie Center topped by a chocolate glaze. Hopefully, that's enough to keep even a chocoholic happy.
The best thing about this recipe is the chocolate, but maybe the second best is we get to bring out a large fluted cake pan. One way to ensure the cake doesn't stick in the pan is to preheat it in the oven, and that's exactly what we're doing here. This temperature of 425 degrees may seem too high for a cake, but we're doing this intentionally. This recipe actually has two parts, and while the cake pan is heating in the oven, we're starting with the Brownie Center. Jamie deserves credit for doing this recipe in cast iron, and that's why we're doing it here. It makes a very light and fluffy batter, even though we're not using any baking powder or baking soda. After mixing the ingredients, we gently fold it all together until it's just barely mixed in. This has to be done by hand. A mixer would be too rough for this. And we have a brownie batter that will serve as the center for the cake. And now to get down to making the actual cake. I'm very proud of this recipe, not just because you can put it all together in one bowl. The ingredients are very simple, and we've heard it all before. You add your flour and sugar and mix it together, then add cocoa powder, baking soda, and whisk it all together. Then add salt, because I forgot to add salt, and make sure it really is all whisked together. It took a while before I realized whisking the dry ingredients is an essential step because it helps to make this a light and fluffy batter. And now we set up the mixer, and here we add in the wet ingredients, starting with 3 eggs, then a cup of buttermilk. We want a good wet batter, so we also add a cup of boiling water to melt the chocolate, and a little bit of vegetable oil to make sure the cake is moist after it's done baking. Then a bit of vanilla extract, and we have the kind of cake batter that a kid would want to dive into head first. And now comes a special trick that we can only do with a heavy metal cake pan. This is an extremely hot cast iron cake pan, and into this we melt a scoop of Crisco. Spread it generously over every inch of the inside of the pan because this is what will keep the cake from sticking. We pour the extra oil into the cake batter and mix it in. Then we pour some of the batter into the hot cake pan. And here we spread some of the brownie batter in to make the center for the cake. Then we cover it up with the rest of the batter, and our chocolate cake goes into the oven. And now for the magic trick. As soon as the cake is in the oven, we turn the oven temperature down to 350 degrees. This will make the oven temperature decrease while the cake is baking. I've found it's best to bake the cake for between 50 minutes to an hour, depending on your oven. If the old skewer test says the cake is too moist, put it back in for another 10 minutes. Much better. And at last, our chocolate cake is ready. And here's the next important step. At this point, we let it rest for 20 minutes before flipping it. The cake pan is still hot when it's time to flip the cake.
Oh, crap. All right, well. Okay. For better or for worse. Here we go. Ha-ha! And voila! We have our birthday cake.
Well, that wasn't one of my best cake reveals, but it still worked because the cake still came out clean, and we have our chocolate cake at last. Now we can let the cake cool off completely, and it will be time to glaze it. And while the cake is cooling off, we can use the rest of that brownie batter and make an awesome pan of brownies, courtesy of Jamie's recipe. This will certainly keep people satisfied while the cake is cooling. And again, it took a lot of practice to come up with a decent glaze that didn't have a lot of lumps in it. I finally realized this is like putting a gravy together. We add in our milk a little bit at a time and keep stirring until we get just the right consistency. Adding all of the milk at once simply won't work, and this has to be done a little bit at a time. And finally, we can glaze our cake. And once the glaze is solidified, it's time to serve our chocolate cake.
This cake turned out very satisfying, and it was even enough to keep someone like Jamie happy. So I'm very pleased to present this to you, and I do hope you feel like giving it a try, because of course there's no such thing as too much chocolate. Thank you for watching.